Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. This may be your second talk with us today because this is our usual Sunday talk time within the Nine-Sided Circle. This morning we had our talk that we do every third Sunday of the month. So if you missed that and you'd like to join us, you can join us in April at 10:30 a.m. PDT on, the third Sunday of that month. In the meantime, here we are. We'll be doing this every week, as we always do. I am one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle.
And I am the other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
So, do we need to do a little bit of a spiel? Of
We always need to do a little bit of a spiel.
course we do.
All right. So, welcome to our video. If this is your first time watching one of our videos, you are doubly welcome. We would ask you if you would be so kind to do a couple of things. One is hit the like button on this. You don't have to do it right at the moment. You can actually watch the whole video and decide whether you like it or not and hit it then. And the other thing that we would ask is that you consider subscribing. That subscribe button down there is actually calling your name. If you listen very closely, it's saying, click me, because it wants you to subscribe to us. And there are many benefits to having a subscription to the Nine-Sided Circle. Tigers will likely not eat you if you have a subscription to us. Not 100% guaranteed, but it gets very low odds of being devoured by tigers. And this is also a time when we are encouraging anybody who can to please feel free to make a donation. The rampant inflation in the US is crushing us right now. Especially out here in California where everything is 5 times as expensive as anywhere else anyway. So if you can, think about making a donation to keep us on the air. If you can't, that's okay. And if you're desperate, let us know and maybe we'll make a donation to you. You can never tell. So there we are.
Thank you. Yeah. Yep. So, here we are. Second talk of the day. We are going to be talking about something different from this morning, but if you're interested in that after this video, of course, you can check our recent videos and see that we talked about storytelling as a craft and an art this morning. And we touched on some stuff related to the Enneagram of Process involving storytelling, so check that out if you'd like. But now we are going to be talking about mastery. Mastery from a Sufi perspective, what it is and what it is not. Tell us more, Mushtaq.
All right, so the standard idea of mastery is that of the binary, master and slave, master and servant, leader and follower. And that's not what we're talking about. That's old technology. That's like the tube radios of self-improvement. Now, I know some people really like tubed amplifiers. I happen to be one of them, but that's a different story. So most people, when they hear mastery, they think, oh, I'm going to be a master. That means I'm better than everybody else. That means people must obey me. And we see this all the time in the spiritual marketplace. All of these guys who think, yeah, I know the stuff, so everybody should follow what I say. I'm the master, come and be my servant. We see this in old style Sufism all the time, where you have the word Molana, like in Jalaluddin Rumi, means our master. And there are Sufi teachers who want to be treated as masters, who want to be called masters. Hanging out in the Khanaga, and the guy comes through and it's, oh, master this, master that. And you're expected to obey anything that is told to you uncritically. And there was probably a place for that at one time, but there is not a place for that today, as far as we're concerned. And that's not the kind of mastery that we're talking about. That is a finite game. You get to the top of the heap, and there you are, and the game's over because you're at the top, and nobody else can get up there. And that's usually what you see is nobody gets up to be at the level of the master. That's forbidden. And eventually, if you're lucky, there will be one person who does it, but it's probably the master's kid or his best buddy or something, and it's designed so that it's handed down. But the regular people never develop. And I actually had one Iranian Sufi teacher tell me that. I said, "So, you're a perfect master. What is it going to take for me to be a perfect master?" And he looked at me like I was crazy and said, You'll never be a perfect master.
Really?
Yeah. It's like, no, that is much too high a state for you. Be a perfect servant. That's exactly what he said. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, what do you pay? I didn't stick around there very long.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure he said those things in earnest, right?
He was absolutely serious, and you
Right.
could tell that by the people around him.
So, as Aaron asks, did he have a reason why?
I was a lowly Westerner, and as far as he was concerned, um, if you weren't born Iranian, you could probably never reach the higher levels of Sufism. Yeah, yeah,
Sounds
that's
boring.
you run across that, and it's okay. I didn't mind. It's like, oh, I don't have to be here, which didn't. I didn't enjoy anyway because almost everybody there smoked like a chimney. Yeah,
Have our
seriously.
struggles, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is not the mastery that we are interested in. Like I said, that's the binary finite game mastery. And it requires masters and slaves. And that never ends well. There's another kind of mastery, which is the mastery of your skills, the mastery of yourself. And it's an infinite game. There is no end to it. The idea of mastery in this sense is you get to a point where you can actually do the work and then you refine the work infinitely and you never stop. Um, there was that quote that I put up uh, in the talk by George Leonard, which I am going to read to everybody again because it is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, assuming that I can get it to open. There we go. For the master, surrender means there are no experts. There are only learners. So do you see what that's saying? The idea of being the expert is really non-existent uh, because when you're around real masters, they are constantly learning. They never say, oh, I've reached the pinnacle. I can stop now. It's like, further. It's like that famous bus from the 60s, which started just down the road from us. Ken Kesey in the bus. The name of the bus was Further. So, how do you put your foot on this path of mastery? Well, as it happens, we have an Enneagram for that. And I am going to draw it up and share it with you guys. And we can talk about it as a place to start with this conversation. Let me know when y'all can see it.
I can see it. Let's see a few thumbs up if you guys can see it.
Okay, looks
Great,
like it's up.
thanks.
Great. So we start at the 0-9 point, the entering and exiting shock, and we look at the entrance, the discovery of something that you are compelled to master. Not that you think, oh, that might be fun. It has to be something that calls to you strongly. So I'm going to use an example of me because I live with me all the time, and I can tell you. So one of the things that I was powerfully drawn to was the mastery of fencing, and not collegiate fencing, but HEMA fencing, the old stuff with the rapiers and the long swords and stuff.
It's historical European martial arts,
Yeah,
for those who don't know.
hitting people with real swords, only without edges. Um, and that wasn't something that was like, oh, maybe I'd like to do that one day. It was like, yeah, I really need to do that now. And so, if I put my foot on this path, the first step is gaining access to the elements of the skill. What do I need to have and what do I need to know in order to learn this style of fencing? So I need to have a sword. I need to have a mask and a jacket, a set of gloves, maybe a dagger, because those play. And I need to have all the protective gear. Trust me, I needed a cup. One of my favorite fencing partners was a smaller woman who enjoyed targeting the groin so much. And she was good at it. So I needed all of these, and I needed uh, the manuals. The HEMA has been recreated from the existent manuals of the time. So the system that I studied is the Spanish schools, and there are two sides to the Spanish school, what they call the verdadera, which means the true school, and the común, the common school. The common school was more military fencing, the things that were taught as a group of people with swords and spears and shields and whatever you needed, who would go out together and conquer Mexico or whatever you had for the time. The La Verdadera Destreza was a dueling system. It was one-on-one, and so it was just a little bit different. So I had to have access to the basic knowledge of that. Once I had that, I move around the circle to 2. 2 is spending time with those who have achieved a level of mastery and beginning to practice. Now, this is important. If you are practicing and nobody has any skill, it's going to be kind of ugly. And, I've had to do that from time to time. We're all beginners here. None of us know. We're reading the manuals. We're trying to figure out what's what does this mean? And when you get to hang out with somebody who has developed a level of mastery within this particular skill set, whole vistas open up for you. And why it says who have achieved a level of mastery is because that's how you learn. One of my favorite people, I spent a lot of time with the SCA, the Society for Creative Anachronism, which many people think has to do with dressing up funny and pretending that you're a knight from somewhere. But dressing period is part of what they do, but they have 2 styles of fighting. One is with heavy armor, and they use rattan wasters, heavy rattan wasters. And there's a lot of clanging and bashing. And the other kind, which is the kind that I was interested in, did not use armor. It was what they call blouse fencing, fencing just in your clothing, and used steel rapiers, steel longswords, and you still have a good level of protection. But within the SCA, there are people who have reached a level of mastery. They're actually known as masters of defense. We call them mods for short, MODs. And some of them are better teachers than others. But that's part of what they do. They've earned this high station, and it is incumbent upon them to pass their knowledge on. And this one guy, I fenced with him at in Berkeley, which is the place where the SCA started. And he had this wonderful ability to fence just above my level. If I was fencing at 3 inches, he would fence at 4. He wouldn't fence at 10. And yes, he was good enough that he could beat me probably 5 times out of 5 if we were playing the hard game. But he wouldn't do that. He would fence me 1 inch above, forcing me to stretch myself every time I fenced with him. And that is a level of mastery that you want to have around you. That is like, it's like the sourdough starter. If you're the dough, he's the sourdough starter. And that ability to get you just past your edge is absolutely priceless. After you've done this for a while, you get around to point 3, which is the first shock. And that's dedicated to the path of this dedication to the path of the skill. This is where you have to go. Yes, this is something that is so important to me that I am going to devote the rest of my life to mastering it. If you can't say that, then you're not on the path of mastery. And it doesn't just have to be one thing. I have a few things that I have worked to achieve a level of mastery in. And sometime we're going to have to talk about polymaths in Sufi practice, because Sufis are noted for producing polymaths. But that's for another time. So, dedication to the path of the skill, this initial shock point. So, if you get past that little hump, if you truly dedicate yourself, then your practice deepens and it integrates. And it integrates, I like to say, body, mind, and breath. You can say body, mind, and spirit because spirit comes from the Latin spiritus, which means breath, related to the Greek pneuma, which means breath, or the Sanskrit prana, which means breath. So, integration of body, mind, and breath. And that is done through serious practice, being adventurous, hanging out more and more with people who have achieved the level of mastery, and not being afraid to try new things. One reason in fencing that people don't become masters is because they learn 2 or 3 high performance tricks. And once they've learned those, they stick with them. There was one guy who I would fence occasionally. He had one trick, which was he had a very, very long sword, and he would keep it in a low guard by his hip and then strike out when you got in the range of the tip. And he was so far away from you that you couldn't reach him. And that was his one trick, basically. He didn't have much else. And he was really proud of it, so much so that if you screwed his trick up, he would get angry. Yeah, I got to the point where I knew what he was doing. I could counter it, and there were occasional times where I just hit him every time we got out, and he would get angry to the point where it's like, yeah, I don't need to make this guy angry. I don't need to win against him. So I spent a lot of time letting him win and then going on and fencing people who are more interesting. So deepening your practice is incredibly important at step 4. Step 5 is to step out and test your skills in the real world.
Do we
This is
have
where,
a?
yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Levita had a question about this person, but she's just asking, it didn't occur to him to learn another trick, which I think is
no,
relevant to a lot of us. Yeah, like,
yeah, he never felt he needed one. And I saw a lot of people like that. They have a couple of good things that they can do and they can pull off really easily, and then they never learn anything beyond it.
so on the path to mastery, that's something that we would like to
Yeah.
make
The
sure
path to
we don't get
mastery
stuck in.
involves accepting risk. You have to be willing to lose a match in order to learn. And the learning needs to be more important than the winning. And that gets us to 5, which in fencing is you start to go to tournaments, fence
So,
against other systems, other schools, discover what you're good at and what you're not.
so we
And
passed the equator at
yeah,
this
we've
point,
passed
as
the
you were
equator
saying.
and you can't really go back from that. Um, and so you spend a lot of time here. If this is the guild system, 5 is where you become a journeyman. You take your shit out into the world and you prove that you can do it. You know, you and your donkey show up at some village and you say, I have pots I can mend for you. You know, bring out your broken pots and I'll fix them. And if you're good, then you'll fix the pots and the people will be happy. And if you're not, then they will be pissed at you and they'll chase you out of the village, oftentimes throwing rocks. So this is where the rubber meets the road. Somewhere in here, after you have spent a significant amount of time um, testing your skill in the real world, you will come to the point where you can surrender to your training. You hear this in a lot of different places where people have achieved mastery. Um, the Navy SEALs, who are masters at what they do, there is no doubt about that. They will all tell you, trust your training. Train hard, train well, and trust your training. If you do, if you do trust your training at this point, if you surrender to these skills that you have learned, you will begin to touch the flow state. And that is where real mastery begins. When you can fight and fence or do whatever you do, bake bread in the flow state, it is going to be better than any other bread you've ever made. I can tell you that fencing from flow is a whole different thing. I remember one of the last tournaments I fought in eastern Michigan. I faced a friend who was, yeah, we were pretty equal to each other. But I had had a couple of matches beforehand, and he needed to have a particular kind of fencing match in order to qualify for a rank. And so he asked me if I would be the person who fenced him while the judges looked at him. And I'm not sure what set it off, but I fell completely into a flow state while we were doing it. And at one point, I did this beautiful bind on him. You see this in the movies sometimes where you take your sword and it spins around and around the other person's sword and spirals in to touch him. It almost never happens in real life. And I got that on him and I totally controlled him from beginning to end and wasn't even thinking about it. And didn't even realize that I had done something interesting until he stopped and said, "Wow, that was really cool." But that's what happens at this point where you can begin to surrender to your training and just let your training do its thing while you stay awake to it. You stay present to it. You can't go to sleep behind it. You have to stay present to it. This will get you to point 7, which is learning to work within the flow. And when you can work in flow, first of all, when you can enter the flow state in your work, no matter what it is that you do, whether we're talking fencing, we're talking sculpture, we're talking singing, we're talking flower arrangement, it doesn't matter. You will learn significantly faster than in any other state you can be in. The flow state is the place where you can refine your mastery. And we're going to come back to 7. You will see that 8 is continual refinement because that's what it's all about. And 9 is mastery is an infinite game. But at 7, if you remember the moving line, 7 always goes back to the beginning. So when you hit the state of working within flow, you return to the beginning and you start another octave of the process. And it never, ever stops. You will go through these steps of mastery over and over and over again at more and more refined levels for the rest of your life. And you will never get to the end of it. There is no end to mastery. It is an infinite game. You can always refine your skills. And you see that, again, I have to refer to martial arts. You look at videos of somebody like Marahe Washiba. You see videos of him when he is young, and he's strong. He's powerful. You know, he looks like somebody took a 6'4" guy and squished him down into a nail keg. You know, he's all muscle. He's really big, and there are some videos of him back in those days. And then you look at him towards the end of his life, and he's this frail old man, except nobody can touch him. He's just moving through people like they aren't even there. And I've talked to people who were at his dojo and talked about what it was like to be thrown around by him. And it was they all said it was like magic. Only it was just that level of mastery that was so complete and so ephemeral by that point that he was like not quite in the same universe as the rest of us. So this is a basic outline of mastery as an infinite game. This can be used more than once in your life for more than one skill. For instance, this is how to master storytelling. We were talking about storytelling earlier today. And if you want to master storytelling, you follow these steps and you'll get there.
Yes, and one thing we mentioned this morning, but we didn't get the chance to mention now, is if this pattern is not something that you are familiar with, if you're not exactly sure how this is used, we do have videos that we will link to that explain
Yes,
that.
we'll give you the whole playlist of Enneagram material that gives you the basis of this.
But from what we've shared, I think it can be understood that there is a pattern to this in that it can be applied to so many different things, in that it's an invaluable tool to help you understand, okay, where do I start and what happens next?
Now, if you have a teacher, your teacher is the one sitting in the center as the bee. If you don't have a teacher, and this is interesting because I never had a teacher um, in fencing. I never had one person I could go to and say, "Oh, magnificent one, please instill your wisdom in me," or anything like that. I had to be picking stuff up. So you have to be the one sitting in the center and looking at what you need so that you can go out and get it. All the resources were there, and the wonderful thing about the SCA is that unlike a lot of places, people there are really willing to share what they know. They are happy if somebody is interested. You know, the joke is that when somebody new walks in, everybody's thinking, oh God, please be as weird as I am. And it's kind of true. So that was really fortunate for me because I got to hang out with a lot of really good people. And even though I never asked one of them to be my teacher, which you could do with certain people who had reached certain ranks, I was able to learn from them. And I did that by looking at the shock points and the moving lines. So here I am at point one. In order to know what I need by way of gaining access to the elements of the skill, I have to look down to 4 and back to 7. So, in looking down to 4, as the practice deepens, I have to know that um, I need specific elements for that practice. So, I don't want an Italian rapier. Those really long, almost unwieldy things that are used almost like a spear with a fairly simple hilt. You know, I want a rapier of the Spanish school with a slightly shorter blade, slightly broader blade, because the Spanish school loves to cut. And oftentimes, with the later era of the school, with a cup hilt, the classic Zorro sword. Um, and I know that what I want is to be able to work in flow in my fencing. When I'm at 2, I look to 8 and 4 again. So 2 informs my practice. The practice deepens when I have access to the elements that I know are utterly important to the system and leaving the superfluous behind. I've also studied the Bolognese system of fencing from Italy. And I didn't do that, even though I was interested, I didn't do that for the first 10 years that I fenced. I waited until I could do what I needed to do in the Spanish school before I ever looked at the Bolognese school. And the Bolognese school is very close to the methodology that I had trained in, except that they have very long names for everything they do. But it's Italian. Italians tend to be flamboyant. I know that the first shock is going to be coming, and I look back and forward, back to the 9 shock, the entering shock, and forward to what's going to have to happen in letting go, because the first shock has to do with your own will. And that is, can I really dedicate myself to this art? When I get to 4, I have to look along both of those moving lines. Again, what are the elements I need? Who can I get to mentor me? And how can I practice intelligently to integrate this system? Cross the equator and you're going to do these things in reverse. You look at 5, stepping out into the world, you know that you're going to have to work in the flow and continually refine yourself. That's what a journeyman does. The 6th shock is the ultimate surrender to your training. And that's why I use that particular word. And at 7, you look forward to 1, realizing that now you have to go back with everything that you have learned and repeat these steps. Only you will be helping the people on the spiral below you. You will be one of the people who is meeting up with folks at 2 who need to hang out with people who have a certain level of mastery. So that's how it works. And 8 gives you the sense of, yeah, if I want continual refinement, I have to still realize that there is something beyond what I know. And I have to seek that out. I can never rest on my laurels. And that reminds you on the 8 to 5 line, testing your skills in the real world. I've known a number of martial arts teachers who, in their own school, they were king of the hill. But the moment they encountered somebody from another system, they were shit because they never went outside of their own system. And that is a flaw, whether it's fencing or flower arranging. So there we have that. There we have the Enneagram of Mastery. So I'm going to make this go away. And let's talk about it. What do you think? Does this make any sense at all? Have I just wasted 45 minutes of your time talking about this stuff and you're all going, what? Tell me. Reassure me. I'm
Are you
very
sure?
sensitive.
He can be. It's true. Jonathan?
Yes, I had a question. So in going from 6 to 7, there's a surrendering involved in order to be able to achieve a flow state. When you're doing your fencing and you feel that you're achieving a state of flow, is it necessary that a state of self-witnessing is occurring, where you actually can witness yourself from apart while you're doing the fencing,
You don't
or is
witness your, you don't witness yourself apart. The answer is yes, but it's not witnessing yourself from the outside. It's witnessing yourself from the inside.
right.
So when I'm fencing in a flow state, I'm not thinking, "Oh, look, I'm in a flow state. Best way I know to get out of it." You drop right out of it. I'm just there. I'm present with it, and I am delighting in the play of energies between myself and my opponent. It's like we're having this brilliant conversation that has no words, but is a discussion of who gets to poke who.
So self-remembering, self-observation, they're not going to cut it. In the flow state,
That's
it has to
that's
be,
ways to get towards it.
yeah.
Those are necessary steps to approach it. But the self-witnessing state is where you can be there in the flow.
So what is being surrendered? The or the attachment to the feeling of the ego and
Yeah,
the
all that
knowledge,
shit.
and yeah, it's got to all be let go.
Yeah, it's like, what do you got? That's what you surrender. Let it all go and just be there in the moment with the passing of the blades, or with the movement of the flowers, or with the singing of the song or the telling of the story. It's hard to describe, at least for me. It's a little bit difficult to describe the sensation because when I enter into it, it it's completely absorbing my attention. So if I'm telling everybody a story and I step into that flow state and telling the story, I don't think about, oh, look, I'm telling the story from flow. I just do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that with singing for me. The moment I drop out of it and I'm like, oh, I'm doing the thing, that's when anxiety and things like that creep in for me and disrupt the singing of the song. So I have to do my best to just it is kind of like riding a wave in that you just give everything purely to the act of whatever it is you're doing. And
Yeah,
perhaps afterwards you're like, wow, I was really in it. But, you don't do that while it's happening. If you can help it.
yeah. If you do it while it's happening, it'll break the flow.
Exactly. Hmm.
Yeah.
can you, after the event, can you recall the
Yeah, that's
event
when you do
with
the
crystal
self-observation.
clarity?
Yeah. After the event, do self-observation, bracket the event in your mind and look at it and go, what was the trigger that got me here?
Um,
What have I learned from this?
how can I foster that in a way that
Yeah.
isn't over? You know, you don't want to set this thing on it where it becomes like you're pressuring yourself into the flow, because that's not how this works, right?
No,
But
you
you
can't
can,
pressure yourself into flow.
right?
It helps to have a little risk, but not a little pressure, if that makes sense.
Yes. I think it's good to set an intention rather than an expectation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And basically, your thinking mind turns itself off. If you look at EEGs of people in flow states or uh, fMRIs of people in flow states, the frontal lobes go quiet. That's where your self-critic lives. And that part just goes quiet. It's just there. And as long as you are in a state of flow, that part stays quiet. It doesn't bother you. The voices in your head turn off. The voices in your body turn off. And there is just the flow state, and that is the state that leads to true mastery. And this is not mastery over, this is mastery of. And mastery just means you know how to learn. Understand that. It doesn't mean that you have achieved some pinnacle. It means that you now know how to learn and you can deepen these skills for the rest of your life. And if you stop deepening them, you lose your mastery. That seems to be an immutable law, is if you don't use it, you lose it.
So it makes sense then to have a little bit of hunger for the thing.
Yeah. The hunger has to be there forever.
Yes, in the 0 point, it talks about from what I remember of it, you're compelled. There's a compulsion to master something. That compulsion could be just straight desire, interest, but it could also
Yeah.
be out of necessity.
Yeah. And you're right.
Necessity to
It
defend
has to
yourself from being
be
hurt.
it has to be an incredibly powerful motivator. I like motivation rather than compulsion, because compulsion is like, something's forcing me. But no, it's like, I love this so much that I must have it. And yes, it'll keep you from dying sometimes. Back in the day, having really good fencing skills could keep you alive.
A thought from Aaron.
Yes.
So he says, "This makes a lot of sense." And then he said, "I find that reaching those next levels requires working with people on the levels you came from, because their experience of that level can yield lessons you missed on your go round. They
Yeah,
haven't
that's
yet
absolutely true.
Mhm. They haven't yet established the conceptions that can distract from potentially useful ideas."
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, which is why at 7, you go back to 1. But when you touch 2 again, you're one of those people with expertise that now gets to hang out uh, with the newbies.
And it kind of gets you back in that state of beginner's mind
Yeah,
that can be so beneficial when you're committing yourself to something like this.
yeah. The people who I know who have achieved a real mastery in anything stay in beginner's mind. They don't ever think, "Oh, I got it." It's like, "Oh my God, I can learn this. What can I learn today?"
And it keeps it fresh, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're really devoted to a thing, sometimes we didn't even mention this, but you get through those dark nights of the soul where you're feeling like, oh God, am I even making any progress in this? What am I even doing anymore? But if you can stay in a state of beginner's mind, it pushes you through that. It motivates you through that. It keeps you going and makes it easier to come out on the other side and realize how much you love this thing that you've decided to take up and devote so much energy and time to. So there's always something new. There's always something fresh.
So, David, what do you think? You're working towards a level of mastery in your craft?
Yes, I was thinking a lot about uh, these things that I've been making.
Yes.
Ah, yes. Tell
Um,
us a little bit about it for those
that's
who
a
can't see.
3-foot snake whip. Um, I actually just put the finishing touches on a part of it today.
Awesome.
But yeah, I'm definitely at the 1, 2, 3 kind of area and thinking a lot about just the beginning stuff that I need, what skills I need to know, what I need to know for the next step to continually make each iteration or each incarnation of the whip better. And yeah, it's going somewhere.
Cool. Did you
So,
use an English loop on that one, or are you going to use a full?
Figured out the fall hitch.
Ah, excellent.
I sat down and did it, and it was really great.
I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fall hitch is tricky until it's not.
Yep.
but you're well on your way now.
Yeah.
Hey. Cool.
Jayesh, what do you think?
So first concept, the master servant binary model.
Mhm.
So I learned from my teacher that usually people become disciple of any guru or master, but then one should try to become disciple, not of any guru. One can remain disciple for the life. And then learning happens from all the corridors, not from a single entity.
Yeah, I think that's what we mean by when we talk about beginner's mind.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I really like this concept that one can never become master and one can never reach to zenith. So that helps to avoid destination consciousness and one can live in the journey consciousness.
Yes,
Love that.
It makes
Yes.
life interesting.
Yes.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Life is so much more interesting when you see it as the journey rather than
Journey, yeah.
where
Rather
am I
than
going
we
to show
going
up.
to, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for mentioning that.
Yeah, if it becomes a destination, once you get there, there's nothing to do. You just have to sit around and wait till you die. Going, I've reached the destination. There is no fun in that.
Nope. Not for us anyway, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You, McQueen, what are you thinking about? What are you working on mastering, perhaps?
Oh man, that question is much more interesting. Let's start at the beginning of the show. Myself. That's what I'm thinking about, and that's what I'm working on.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good because you always have the tools you need with you then.
Yes, I suppose so. If I could just figure out how to use them.
Maybe the Enneagram can help, We'll see.
Well,
But
I had a nerdy technical Enneagram question for you.
oh,
Sure.
It's so nerdy that I hate
I
it,
love
but
them.
I want to hear your opinion on it. I don't see a clear mapping between that Enneagram and the notes of the scale, do, re, mi, etc.
How's that work out? That doesn't fit into what we're talking about, but I'd like to hear something about that.
Well, it actually is there, and I'm going to have to pull up the screen again.
Yeah, some people have different approaches, but he'll show you ours.
Yeah, and like I said, there's more than one way to do this. There's more than one way to map an octave on an Enneagram, which is one of the things that makes it so flexible. So if you start the do at 1, re, mi, fa, right? Here is the first interval. So, la, si, do, this would be the second interval. That's one way to map it out. At this point, I don't pay as much attention to trying to precisely get the shock points or the solfeggio on the Enneagram. You can also do it with do, re, mi. 3 is the shock point. Fa, sol, la, and then this is not a shock point. Then si, do is up here. And that doesn't work as well for me. But the thing to remember is this will be your mi, fa interval, and this will be your si, do interval. So 7 is actually the last note of the octave, and then it starts at a higher level.
So you're 7 returning to 1.
Yeah, 7 returning to 1. So you would read it in that way: do, re, mi. From mi to fa is the shock point. Sol, la, si, then back to do at 1 again.
That's how I tend to understand it.
And for me, that's the easiest way to set up the octave on this. Is here it is, with this being the tonic at the next level. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it. That way is the way I like the best. This becomes the purpose point, and this becomes the entering and exiting shock that starts the tonic here.
Does that help at all?
Have you ever heard anybody who just grokked the Enneagram quickly? I don't think anybody ever has.
Who did what to the Enneagram?
Grokked it.
Nerd language.
No. I started trying to figure out the Enneagram in 1967, and I think I'm about halfway there. I feel like I'm about halfway there.
If he's halfway there, I'm like a quarter of the way there. So we're all a work in progress. This is mastery, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. The Enneagram is something that you master in the way that we're talking about. You never stop learning about it. If anything that they say about the Enneagram is true, that it is the universal hieroglyphic that you can use to explore the universe with. The universe is pretty darn big. So you're not going to finish that exploration in this lifetime. You probably won't finish that exploration in 1,000 lifetimes. 10,000.
Why would you want to, though? I mean,
Yeah,
there's so
it
much.
takes all the fun out of it.
Yeah.
So that's my Enneagram octave explanation in a nutshell.
Cool. Levita, I'm going to go around and see what everybody's going to think about working on mastering. But Levita, what other thoughts might you like to share, if any?
You might want to just go on around because I got a lot.
That's okay.
We like a lot.
All right, I'll see if I can. Obligatory tie-in to previous video. when you talk about there's only learners, and you were talking about like fellow travelers, when you're going from 7 to 1, when you go back to the beginning, but you're at that next level, and you're
Yeah.
helping people from levels below you, that ties into the video Sufism 2.0,
Yep.
talking about the fellow travelers a little further down the road, because we're all learners. We're just at different levels of learning.
Yeah. I'm glad you made that connection. That's awesome.
Flow, when you were talking about it, and tell me if I've got this. It sounds like flow is total presence moment by moment.
That is a major part of it. Yeah. It's presence in the doing of the thing.
Yeah. When you're going from 7 to 1, that tied in for me with the hero's journey, where the person has left the village, they had all these adventures,
Yep.
and they found allies and everything, and now they bring back what they found back to the village to help the people. And the separate thought that occurred because of it, going from 7 to 1, when you're on that new level and you're starting over with beginner's mind on a slightly higher level, when I've done that, I found that when I reach the next level, I'm able to ask better questions.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That's such a good point.
You get better questions and you get better problems. And
Yeah,
I'm
would
not
say
being
that.
facetious with that. You know, the same old problems get boring. You need to have better and better problems with each cycle. Sometimes harder problems because you're better at solving them, but more
Yeah,
entertaining problems for sure.
yeah, it's like a variant of Clarke's third law.
Yep.
Wait a second. Are you not going to ask her, what are you talking about with Clark's third law?
I know
Nobody-
Clarke's third law. Clarke's third law is that
Well,
any sufficiently advanced technology will appear as if magic.
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, Clarke's third law.
Now,
The corollary is like, as you learn how to do things and you get better at it and you achieve higher levels, your abilities start to look like magic to people who are not aware of how much you've actually done and how far you've actually come. I'll
Yep.
give you an example. I have children. And one day I was in the kitchen and I was doing something quietly and I heard water.
uh-oh.
And in the moment, I turned and I went just like this and I went, get out of the toilet. And a bunch of children come out of the bathroom and they're like, how did you know we were in the toilet? Now, when I sat down and analyzed it, because I was 100% correct, when I analyzed it, I realized I heard water. I did not hear water running. So that meant that there were no sinks involved. Where is there water that you don't hear water running? The toilet.
Yeah.
And that all happened like that. But this was not my first year as a parent. You know, this was like year 15. So certain things just kind of click through. So if you've never had to deal with kids in any way, shape, or form, yes, that appeared like magic. But to another parent, they'd go, yeah. And that's kind of how it is, you know, like Mushtak talking about when he was in flow state with that person, you know, to somebody like me who's like, listen, all I know about that stuff is watching old movies on television, you know, and like the first time my music teacher showed me an A sus chord, I literally sat there like this, do that again. And he kept doing it. I was like I could hear what he did, but I couldn't understand it. And it was something very simple, but to me, it literally was, they were laughing at me because I was like, that was like a magic trick.
Mm.
And today I understand it, but back then,
Yeah.
it was so far above my head that, you know.
remember starting out Enneagram stuff and being like, I think you're gonna have to explain that to me like 4 more times before I get it.
And it only took 2.
Aw. Yep.
Yeah, and it is like that. I remember the first time I sang an overtone note, which is where you produce 2 notes out of the same throat at the same time, the tonic and one of its overtones. And it was like, holy shit, I'm doing this. It's like magic. Listen to that. And of
How I
course,
felt
I
when
immediately stopped being able to do it.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I whistled for the first time. I was like, oh my god, it happened! It happened! But I'm not a very good whistler, so I didn't strive for mastery with that, but that's
You can
okay.
buy a good whistle at the store. So
Indeed, yes. I'll just use like a recorder and drive everyone crazy with that, because
Yeah, or you can
anyways.
borrow my emergency whistle out of my little emergency pack, which is so loud that birds
God.
fall from the sky.
No! Dangerous. So,
if you've got crows, they're gonna get you.
Yeah, we like our crows, so we do not vex them.
yes. Levita, what are you striving for mastery on?
Oh, the list goes on. I would have to live to be at least 150 to even begin to touch it. There's any number of things. Right now, I'm just trying to get the pedal on this piece of music I'm learning. And I thought I got the first part of it. And I was like, yes, I've got it where you can tell what I'm trying to play. And I was like, I'm ready to move on to the next part. And then I realized this piece requires the use of the pedal, the effective use of the pedal for it to sound correct. And my
Yeah.
teacher was like, I thought I was like holding it too long. He was like it's not connecting. And I'm like, oh man.
Work
So
in progress. You got this.
yeah, and the piano's too big to throw out the window. This is where I
Mm.
wish I had taken up the flute. If I taken up the flute,
Yeah.
I could just get mad and bang it against something.
We'll keep up the good work. Yeah. David, did I see you unmuted at some point? I just wanted to make sure.
Nope.
Nope. Cool. Got it. So you're working on mastering your knot work, right?
Yes.
Anything else?
That's what it is right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. How about you, Jonathan?
I'm working on mastering of trying to become aware of the different centers in myself, like the thinking center, the heart center, and the 3 moving centers, moving, instinctive, sex center. Just what their functions are, and what am I doing now? Am I in the thinking center? Am I in the heart center? Am I in the moving center? That kind of thing.
That'll keep you busy for a week or 2.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, or 10.
Do you feel like that's part of any bigger project, perhaps?
Yeah, self-awareness, but it's at least it's something that's a bit more concrete. That there's lots of stuff written on it, and I can feel it happening in the moment. But like clearly, there's some right now. There's thinking center going on. That my hands are moving and my head's moving. This is moving center. And yet I'm feeling hot. I've got too many clothes on right now. This instinctive centers going on there. So that kind of thing. And I'm a little nervous, being on the spot. So we've got several centers going on there.
I like that. Good work.
Yeah.
Well done. How about you, Jayesh? What are you working on mastering? And Aaron, you too. I just want to give you a chance to type it out.
2 things. Actually, I'm doing some breathing exercises learned from Rajan Bhatti. So since years I'm doing those exercises and still trying to learn, be present during those exercises, and chanting mantras. So that's the journey.
That
It is
will
a
keep
journey.
you going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long journey.
Yeah. Are you using a particular method of chanting?
Uh, uh, I used to chant Om,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to uh, learn how to tone it, how to pronounce it, so that I can get into the flow of chanting of Om.
Okay. So
And
nothing more complex as far as mantras go.
no.
Okay. It's
Well, I
good to
mean,
And
start
and
small.
also
Yeah.
and also I chant Gayatri mantra.
Okay.
I didn't hear that. What was that?
Gayatri.
Gayatri mantra.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is the oldest mantra in the world that we have any record of. And starts with Om.
Yes. Starting there. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Jayesh. And Aaron says he's working on mastering being an adult and integrating his adult self into the wider world one step at a time. Amen.
Yeah.
And I am working on mastering singing still. And editing is another thing I'm working on mastering. And teaching is another thing I'm working on mastering. What about you, Mushtaq?
I am working, well, on a bunch of stuff, but the thing that I am really working hardest on right now is mastering the ability to teach effectively across the internet, which is a skill in and of itself.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm just barely scratching the surface on this. I'm a lot more fun in person, folks.
You do well, though. Yeah.
I feel that
I think
you have passed the third octave actually.
you definitely scratched the surface. I think the surface is kind of like you're deep,
Now
you're
you're
getting
feeding
in
my
there.
ego.
That's all right.
Yeah,
I only feed egos when it's true.
there you go. Take that, ego. Chomp it down.
Because who knows what I will say next week.
Yeah, take it when you can get it. I feel like when I compare how I teach a group that I am with in the same room to what I do here, it is so much more fun and so much more rich to teach in person. And it's like, how much can I do that through the screen? Can I reach out into your computer and grab a hold of your mind and twist it and
Brains.
turn it? Yeah, brains.
Well, I mean, we're seeing what we can do to build up to that through this milieu,
Yeah, that's one reason why I'm doing this.
One of the
because
nice things,
this will make that possible, inshallah.
Yeah, it's definitely honing my skills slowly but slowly.
Aaron says, I feel your hand on my gray matter. Creepy.
one of the nice things being able to do it this way is that I've only been to California once. I don't have a lot of extensive experience off the East Coast. So the odds are like this, that I would encounter you in person, unless you are actually in my neck of the woods. So when you're teaching on Zoom, it's like, oh, like I'm exposed to all kinds of things that make my gray matter churn, you
Yeah.
know? And so, of course, the people who have to deal with me in real life are kind of like, what? But they're not thinking about this stuff. So
Yeah,
it's a different thing.
and here's something to trouble your sleep at night. Before we had the plague hit us, I used to travel around the country teaching all the time. People would say, "Hey, come here, teach a workshop. Hey, come over here, teach a workshop. Let's go over there." And I would do stuff on the East Coast. How far are you from,
Oh,
say, Massachusetts?
oh, I'm pretty far. I'm in New Jersey.
That's not
I'm
that far.
Not that far. Yeah.
I'm actually closer to New York City.
I have a bunch of friends there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So,
could happen.
Yep.
but yeah, I mean, but I'm just thinking in terms of like your reach is expanded because now it's like, you know what, on a Sunday evening or a Sunday afternoon, you're talking to people all over the world at the same
Oh
time.
yeah.
And we
It's
do
kind
appreciate
of
that, yeah.
it's mind-boggling. There, when I started teaching, when my teacher said start teaching, there was no internet. There was no video conferencing software at all. And it was all in person. I would have people like fly out from Chicago to work with me for weekends, but that was not that common. So it was all local. It's true that this is nice because this is worldwide. I can be in Florida, in New Jersey for some reason or another, in India and Australia, all at the same time.
Mm.
And see,
And all the
Yeah,
comforts of home when you turn off the camera.
true.
yeah,
So, but you're right. The energy is not the same as being in person.
yeah. And I was trained to be an in-person teacher, so it's a shift for me. And
Whereas, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, given all the learning I've done via this, this method of teaching. Oh my gosh, how is that going to transfer to in person? And that will be interesting, to say the least. But that's part of the deal.
yes, it is.
No chance to get complacent.
No. Nope. Well, everyone, I think that about wraps it up. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely the explosions are starting. So
Thankfully, these are the fun kind, not the scary kind,
yeah.
sort of.
Well, that was like sounded like two M80s wrapped together.
Neighborhood fireworks. All right, so Brady Bunch mode.
Brady Bunch mode.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you if you've joined
Yeah.
us twice today. That's pretty amazing of you.
Yeah,
And
and for those of you who had to leave early, we're sorry, but come back.
but we hope to see you next time. And if you're joining us on the replay, we appreciated having you. And we'll see you soon. So
Yeah,
let's
and
all
if you
wait.
lasted this long, we have a treat for you. And the treat is we're going to put all of the secret stuff up at the end of this.
Secret stuff.
Yeah, we got the secret stuff.
Well, I
All right.
waved to you all. I
Bye,
will miss you.
folks.
Aw, yeah.